he didn't believe in fairies. There was once a farmer who didn't believe in fairies. You should have heard him laugh when fairies were mentioned. Why, he almost deafened you. Now, I expect you've heard it said that only those who believe in the little folk ever see them. Those who don't believe in them can't see them even when they're right under their noses. And often the fairies play tricks on those people just to teach them. Farmer Straw only believed in horses, cows, sheep and things like that. If you mentioned such things as dragons, unicorns, witches or pixies, he would explode with laughter and call you a ninny. The fairy folk used to listen, and they laughed too. It really was funny to them. You see, to think that people said they weren't there when they knew quite well they were there. Now, Farmer Straw had a very fine mushroom field. So had his neighbour Farmer Twinkle, and his other neighbour Dame Busy. And in the autumn they all got up very early in the mornings and went mushrooming. When they sold their mushrooms in the market, they made a great deal of money. One night the little folk had had a dance in Dame Busy's field. It was a grand dance, with the grasshopper band playing Rill half the evening. That's the famous elfin tune, you know, that the grasshoppers know so well. There had been all kinds of games too, and a most delicious feast. And for once it hadn't ended at cockcrow, but just a little bit later. Now this was a pity, because no sooner did the party break up than a rainstorm began, and how it poured, how it pelted. The fairies, pixies and elves raced for the shelter of the mushrooms that had shot up in the night. They crouched beneath them and tried to keep their lovely frocks from being splashed. They hoped the rain would soon stop. But it didn't. No, it went on and on and on. Goodness, the little folk couldn't possibly go home in it. They'd be wet through. And see, there were lights in the farmhouses. People were getting up early to go mushrooming. Then what would happen to the fairies? Dame Busy came out of her farmhouse with a big basket. "Hey, little folk," cried an elf, "we shall be caught here if Dame Busy arrives before we go. She believes in fairies, you know, so she'll see us here under the mushrooms. Let us quickly run to the mushrooms in the other field, those belonging to Farmer Twinkle." So off the fairy folk scuttled through the wet grass and the rain, and soon they were safely sheltering under Farmer Twinkle's mushrooms. But dear me, it wasn't long before the farmer opened his farmhouse door and came out to go mushrooming too. So off the fairies went again, this time to Farmer Straw's mushrooms. And bother me if his door didn't open and out he came to go mushrooming. "Our luck is running out this morning," cried an elf. "Whatever can we do? There are no more mushrooms to shelter us from this dreadful rainstorm. We shall have to go home, and oh dear, what colds we shall get, for we shall be soaked wet through." "No, don't let's get wet," cried a pixie. "There's no need to. Let's each pick our mushroom and use it like the humans use umbrellas. We can carry them all the way home and never get wet at all. As for old Farmer Straw, he won't see us, for he doesn't believe in fairies." laughed all the little folk delightedly. Then they each picked a mushroom, and holding it above their bright little heads, they made their way across the wet field down to the little wood where they lived. Farmer Straw met them as he came to the field with his basket. Yes, he met them, but he couldn't see the fairies, of course, because he didn't believe in them. All he saw was a row of big mushrooms walking solemnly along in the rain. He stood and stared with his mouth wide open. Then he gave a scream of fright and ran back to his farm. Oh, I'm going mad. I've seen mushrooms walking. Oh, what shall I do?" "Don't be so silly," shouted Dame Busy and Farmer Twinkle. "It's only the little folk using them as umbrellas." "I don't believe in fairies," yelled Farmer Straw. "No, that I don't." "Oh, well, if you'd like to believe in mushrooms walking off by themselves instead of the little folk, you do as you like," said Dame Busy scornfully. "But it seems to me to be much easier to believe in fairies than in walking mushrooms." Farmer Straw looked back at the row of bobbing mushrooms, half believing in the little folk for a moment. And just for that moment he saw a roguish face peeping out at him from under a mushroom, and caught the glint of a silvery pair of wings. But it was gone in a flash. "Only ninnies believe in fairies," he said. "I'm not a ninny. There's something gone wrong with my eyes this morning, that's all, or else I'm not properly awake yet. I'd rather believe in walking mushrooms than a dozen fairies, that I would." "But I wouldn't, would you?" Anyway, Farmer Straw lost all his mushrooms that day, and you should have heard the little folk laugh about it. Farmer Straw thought it was the swallows twittering, but it wasn't.